In John's account of the healing of the man born blind, someone asks a question at least 15 times. The disciples ask, the neighbors ask, the Pharisees ask, and ask again. They call in the parents and ask them, and then they bring the man back and ask him again. The questions pile up like depositions in a trial that nobody asked for. We usually call this a story about blindness and healing. And that's fair. A man born blind receives sight. That is extraordinary. But I think it's really a story about questions. And not all the questions are the same. The difference between the quality of the question is, I think, the whole point. The questions start with the disciples. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? That sounds harsh to us. But to be fair, this was not intended as a cruel question. It was a conventional question, the theologically respectable question of the time and place. In first century worldview, suffering had to mean something. Blindness had to mean something. If this man has lived his whole life in darkness, well, someone must be the reason that God did this. Notice what that theology does. Before Jesus says a word, before anything happens in the story, the man born blind has already been rendered a problem. He's not treated as a person. He's treated as evidence. He becomes the community's go-to answer to questions about sin and consequence and how God keeps score between the righteous and the unrighteous. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? He's never been asked what it's like to be blind. He's never been asked what he believed, what he hoped for, what he needed. He's lived his whole life as someone the community has already decided is outside of God's favor. The verdict was rendered before he ever opened his mouth. The next set of questions in this story belongs to the man's neighbors. When the man born blind came back after washing in the pool and he was able to see, well, they just couldn't believe that it was him. Is this the same man? Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg? Someone is healed and standing right in front of them, and they just can't get it. It seems to me that for all the questions this story asks, it also asks of us an honest confession. With whom do we identify in the story? My answer would be that we're like the neighbors. We're the ones who kind of follow the crowd and ask the same questions that everyone else is asking over and over in our disbelief. Because disbelief is cheaper than encounter. If something has happened that doesn't quite fit the categories, everything kind of gets complicated, and the theology of deserved suffering is so loud that it echoes even in our time and place. We still read suffering as God's judgment. We build it into policy. We design benefit systems with work requirements and time limits as if poverty were primarily a moral failure requiring personal correction, rather than a systemic condition requiring communal solutions. We debate who deserves health care based on, well, how did you get sick? We watch a person sleeping on a grate and wonder what did they do to end up there? As though the more urgent question were not, what are we doing while they sleep there? The disciples' question has been institutionalized. We call it personal responsibility. And the church, our tradition, our institution, the body that we are part of, the church has not been immune. We have been, in too many chapters of our history, the antagonists in the story, using authority to determine who belongs and who doesn't, whose call is valid and whose isn't, whose experience of God counts and whose is inadmissible. When we ask our questions, the church does it in the name of infidelity, of fidelity. We ask in the name of order. We keep asking because asking is safer than being willing to change based on what we find. The crowd keeps asking, is this the same man? We are the crowd. But notice that Jesus never answers the question. He rewrites it. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. The question isn't only wrong in its specifics, it's wrong in its premise. Because suffering is not a verdict. This man's blindness is not evidence of anything except for the fact that God is about to act. And so Jesus heals him without being asked, without requiring a statement of faith first. He makes mud, spreads it on the man's eyes, sends him to wash, and he comes back seeing. That's remarkable enough, but it's still not the point of the story. The questions are. The Pharisees throw the man out of the synagogue after their own repeated questioning, but this is not actually a fall from belonging. After all, he already was a beggar. His parents seem already to have abandoned him. The community had already failed him long before this moment. So this expulsion is not really a new rejection. It's the institution finally making official what was already implicit. You were never really one of us. In other words, the Pharisees knew the answers they wanted to hear before they even asked them. And Jesus, who is nowhere to be seen during this interrogation, Jesus goes looking for him after his expulsion. After. Jesus finds him outside in that place of rejection. And Jesus asks him a very different kind of question. The first genuine question in the story. The only one that really matters. Not what happened to you. Not can you prove it. Not do you understand what the institution has decided about you? Jesus asks, do you believe? It's an invitation to name himself from the inside, to claim an identity that doesn't come from the institution's verdict, that doesn't depend on anyone's recognition, that cannot be cross-examined into non-existence. I was blind, and now I see. You cannot argue with that. You can disbelieve it. You can interrogate it. You can throw the man out. But you cannot make it not true. It happened. It is his experience. It is Women's History Month. In a couple of weeks, we will gather to come together for a film screening to watch Philadelphia 11, the story of the first 11 women ordained to the Episcopal Church's priesthood back in 1974, before the church had officially authorized it. The House of Bishops didn't wait long to declare those ordinations invalid. The institution quickly rendered its verdict. What happened didn't count. The door is not open. But those 11 women could only say what the man born blind said. I was called, and I know it. The Spirit had done something. The institution wasn't consulted. No declaration of invalidity could reach back through time and uncall them. Because once the Spirit moves, she does not wait for a committee. Thank God the church eventually caught up. Thank God that St. Margaret's has known from our own life together what it looks like when the institution finally opens the door that it had been holding shut. We've been formed by this history. We carry it with us. But we would be too comfortable, the wider church, but us too, would be too comfortable, too much like the neighbors in the story, if we thought all the work was finished. What do we do when the Spirit calls someone that the institution finds inconvenient? Because they can't afford to go to seminary. Perhaps because they don't speak English. Perhaps because they're too old. What do we say to the person who hears God's voices clearly, has always heard God's voice, but keeps being told, for reasons that have nothing to do with their gifts or their faith or the quality of their call, that the door is not open? The man born blind didn't argue theology with anyone. He just kept saying what had happened to him. He said it to the neighbors. He said it to the Pharisees the first time and the second time. He said it when his parents wouldn't stand beside him. He said it right up to the moment that they threw him out. If that is your story, if you carry a call the institution hasn't recognized, if you've had an experience that keeps getting questioned, if you have a testimony you've had to repeat again and again in the face of disbelief, well, keep saying it. You don't have to have the credentials. You just have to keep saying what happened to you. The man born blind had no guarantee of what the outcome would be. He just couldn't not speak his truth. And where did Jesus find him? On the outside. So this story is not just theology, it's geography. It tells us where to look. Not inside the room where all the powerful are, but outside with the ones who keep saying what happened to them, with the ones whose testimony the institution finds inconvenient, with the ones who are already on the margins before anyone got around to asking their official questions. Do you believe? Jesus is still asking. And the answer, whenever it comes, wherever it comes, at whatever cost it comes, is the beginning of an identity that no one can revoke, no expulsion can touch, and no interrogation can silence. I was blind, and now I see. Amen.